Story 1, more of a job-specific thing, but literally any tradesman that will argue that modern personal protective equipment is unnecessary. I don't care if your grandpappy used to use a paint sprayer without a respirator. I'm trying to not destroy my lungs. Work smarter. Putting yourself into an early grave to make shareholders or your boss happy is moronic. Story 2. I once had a job with what was called a no-fault policy. If you were late or absent 7 days in a year without prior notice, you were fired. Prior notice required a week's warning. If you were sick 2 days in a row, that counted as 2 points against you. If you were late because of an accident ahead of you on the highway, that was a point. If there was a blizzard and they closed the road, that was 1 point. I never accumulated more than 3, but one lady whose kids were sick and in the hospital racked up 3 points in a week. No fault meant it was not the company's fault you got fired. Story 3, diamonds. Diamond engagement rings only became popular in the 1920s due to aggressive marketing by the De Beers diamond cartel. Diamond mining is often done under horrendous conditions, and then most of them are locked away to keep the prices high. That $1,000 diamond ring is a lie. Diamonds are not actually that rare. Story 4. Irresponsibly selective breeding of dogs is a concerning issue. People often desire either a cute, petite dog or a tough-looking pit bull, while completely disregarding the genetic deformities that significantly decrease the quality of life for these animals. Many of these dogs die at a relatively young age, and if they miraculously reach old age, they end up suffering tremendously as their health issues become magnified. Unfortunately, many of the individuals who initially wanted to have or breed these animals end up abandoning them or neglecting them until the animals are no longer able to endure their struggles and pass away. Story 5. An 8-hour-a-day, 5-day-a-week work schedule is still considered the minimum expected standard for employees. This was supposed to be the maximum as established by labor laws and guidelines from decades ago, not the bare minimum. COVID-19 reminded us and demonstrated just how unnecessary and detrimental this is to society and worker health overall. Most people can complete their tasks and duties with an adjusted schedule that allows for more time at home. However, we cling heavily to tradition and old practices in this area. Story 6. Only getting 2 days for the weekend per week never feels long enough. I think 3-day weekends should become the norm. The work week should be Monday through Thursday. 4-day weekends are probably too long, though. I won't go that far. They should be reserved for special occasions. Story 7. Going broke to have an extravagant marriage and spending said money on things that ultimately don't really matter during your wedding. I'm at an age now where people around me start marrying, and my boyfriend and I are actively keeping a list of things we missed or need to avoid for our own eventual marriage. Story 8. Giant green lawns that are nothing but non-native turf grass covered in chemical treatments. This year, World Migratory Bird Day had the tagline "No insects, no birds," because so many bird populations are declining due to insect population collapse. There are many reasons behind this, but on a micro level, monoculture lawns are causing whole areas to be basically devoid of insect life. Especially when you pair that with municipal mosquito spraying, which kills all the bugs, not just mosquitoes, and the lack of native plants anywhere that plants are allowed to exist, like in landscaping and parks. The old trend was to have giant lawns to show you were so rich you didn't need to grow food, and now we've just had this idea so embedded in our culture that it's incredibly hard to break out of it. Story 9. Fitness and fad diets. Weights and resistance are great for any age. Kids especially. There's no evidence whatsoever of growth plate damage or abnormalities. Post-menopause, it's even more beneficial as it can help reduce the issues of osteoporosis by stimulating appositional growth and bone mineral density. The whole problem is due to such poor quality and misinformation from supposedly reputable sources. Fitness influencers are terrible, but even many doctors weigh in on it when it's outside of their specialism and misuse the respect they should rightly hold for what they are qualified to do. I work with lots of doctors in my particular field. General practitioners know very little about exercise and should absolutely not be prescribing any form of exercise plans or advice, and should be referring to specialists or qualified professionals instead. It's a different specialism, like most things in medicine, with its own very specific knowledge base. The whole industry is so poorly regulated. It's a mess, and the general public are then bombarded with ineffective products by opportunists and don't know where to turn. Story 10. The way we treat kids as if they're idiots. Kids need people they love and trust to help them understand the world. Talking to an older kid as if they're babies or saying no all the time arbitrarily with zero explanation, is that really helping? I remember feeling furious all the time at adults when I was a kid, and it's only when I learned the word patronizing that I understood why I was so angry. You're not just raising kids, you're providing lifelong guidance and support to the adults they will become. Edit because of typo. Story 11. Clinging to differences and using differences to define rather than similarities can create barriers between people. It leads to justifying hate, treating others as less than, or completely failing to recognize them as fellow human beings. We all have more in common than what separates us. So why are we not working together? Story 12. I have never understood how you can limit people's sick time or give it in advance. You may get poorly only 3 times in 1 year. We have sickness policies in the United Kingdom to stop people from taking advantage, and as a non-national health service nurse, I do not get sick pay. But if I am sick, and I am going to be off for however long I need to be off. The United States system is so bizarre. Story 13. I'm in real estate. I see a new generation of realtors still saying, "You are wasting your money on rent," all while trying to sell houses to people who can't afford them. Yes, your mortgage will be roughly about what you are paying in rent, but you haven't taken into account that owning a house costs money in taxes. I have pulled more than a few aside and told them what they are doing is immoral. For those who don't know, the slogan, "You are wasting your money on rent," was created by the National Association of Realtors in the 1980s to get renters to get into the housing market. It's a completely made-up statement that doesn't apply to everyone across the board. Sometimes it makes sense to rent, and some people are better off renting given their lifestyle choices. Story 14. Alpha Dog and Cesar Millan's absolute load of nonsense he derives from that author debunked theory that was not about dogs, or an accurate study of wolves. It gave people a justification to take their anger and frustration out on their dogs, to blame the dog for their issues, and to continue the cycle of abusive dog ownership that had been going on for decades. Justified what Dad and Grandpa did to the dog. Oh yes, it was really okay. David S. Mech accidentally set dog training back decades. And Cesar Millan and the team who wrote that show should be ashamed of their part in that. He is one of the most influential people in that landslide. Cesar Millan was a charismatic dog groomer who got rich pretending to care about the welfare of dogs. The damage that show did will take generations to undo. Story 15, Stranger Danger, was an effort primarily focused on preventing child sexual abuse by warning children about associating with adults they don't know. In reality, over 90% of child sexual abuse is perpetrated by someone known to the child and/or child's family. A better alternative, as highlighted by Child Safe Canada, is focusing on identifying actions and behaviors that are inappropriate regardless of the person. Story 16. Some consulting companies reduce your salary every time you are sick for less than 5 days in a row. Weighing salary versus health is illegal in Europe, but their salary contracts are complicated enough that they can still do it. Story 17. Putting every single piece of produce in its own plastic bag. What are you all doing? You know you have to wash that anyways, right? It's literally been sitting in dirt. Do you think the cart or your reusable bag is going to get it dirtier? Story 18. I live in Appalachia. People who are all zen and natural and at one with nature will hike to any of our rivers and balance a bunch of rocks which will, I do not know, increase their vibrations or something. Know what it does? It takes nature and turns it into a big sign that says, "Humans were here," which defeats the purpose of nature. Plus, we have critically endangered stream life around here that depends on some of those rocks for their habitat. Rooting around trying to find that perfect flat rock to make your chakra more whatever it needs to be harms the creatures that need the most protection. Stop balancing rocks into a pile on other rocks in the middle of a river. All it does is make you think how amazing and cool and different you are. Story 19, Zero Tolerance Policies. It is so stupid that schools will look at a kid getting attacked and say, "Well, you were in the fight." Then you get in trouble. Most of the time, if someone fights back to defend themselves, they usually receive a harsher punishment than the one who started the fight. I am speaking from personal experience. I mean, seriously, explain to me why someone being attacked deserves a week's worth of suspension. but the attacker gets only a detention. Story 20. Prison Industrial Complex. People believe that incarcerating criminals enhances safety. However, more than half of the prisoners suffer from untreated trauma and mental illness that is not addressed in prison and often worsens. In the long term, we need a restorative system rather than a punitive one if people genuinely wish to improve safety. Instead, many prefer the illusion of safety, using criminality as a scapegoat. Meanwhile, the resolution rates for violent crimes remain exceedingly low. Story 21. Letting your cats freely roam outside has destroyed wildlife in the United States. People continue to do it, not realizing they are apex predators that ruthlessly kill native birds, bats, rodents, amphibians, and reptiles. It is so selfish. Story 22. Raking up leaves and placing them in a large plastic bag, then discarding those leaves in that plastic bag into the dump raises a question. Why do we produce more garbage to throw away natural materials instead of using them in another way? Story 23. A children's education system that refuses to accept that children develop at different speeds. Nearly all school systems in the world work on the basis that at a certain age, a child should be able to do certain things, and if they can't, then that is seen as a problem. The reality, though, is that all children develop at different speeds. Some might struggle with reading longer than their peers, only for them to pick it up with no issues a year or two later. Having these artificial checkpoints is unhealthy for the children because it makes them think they are failing or deficient in some way, and at the same time causes stress and worry for their parents. In particular, it really harms undiagnosed neurodivergent children who can take news of their failure to heart more than other children do. Of course, you do need to test children every now and again to make sure they are developing, but the system needs to be more relaxed and more flexible to accommodate the fact that all children learn differently. Story 24. Purity culture. Teaching someone that their very humanity, their worth as a human being, depends on their virginity is so messed up. It doesn't teach them about healthy relationships. It posits that some people deserve to be raped because they didn't play by the rules. Pits women against each other. Creates shame. It robs people of genuine friendships. It assumes that someone who spent their whole life being told that if they so much as think about sex, they'll be like chewed gum, will suddenly be able to just magically flip a switch on their wedding night. It doesn't teach them about responsive desire. It doesn't teach them about consent. It makes women responsible for men's behavior. It doesn't teach them anything medically or scientifically accurate about their bodies or their sexual health. It teaches them that their bodies belong to someone else, who they've never even met and who may not even exist. And it doesn't actually lead to a decrease in unwanted or teen pregnancy or STIs.